Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, look at all this luggage I have here. Oh my God, I don't know if they're gonna let me get on the plane with it. I'm glad we booked, Tim. I'm glad we booked first class tickets for you, me, and our guest, because I know we're going to be going around the world tonight on a paranormal escapade, and I certainly don't want to sit back and coach. I mean, my God, just looking through the curtain, I can see there's havoc going on back there. What chaos! Boy, I'm glad we're up here in front. Sorry, stewardess. Yes. We'll sit down. Don't worry about it. We'll take it. Oh my goodness! Here comes. Oh well. All right, we'll behave. I promise. All right, just pass the champagne. Hey Tim, how you doing? Are you on board? Are you got your seatbelt on over there?
We're on the road to nowhere. Yes, Tim, I'm on board and ready to go.
Oh boy. I'm glad we're in first class, because we would never make it otherwise. We got a long journey. And I see our guests are here with us. They're sitting across from us in the next aisle.
Yes, that's right. They've already been they've already broken into the champagne.
Manhandled. Yeah, they've already been.
No. We're going to make sure that none of our guests, I mean, they're privileged. They're the elite of exploring the bizarre.
Well, I did want to take a UFO, but we had to settle for a 747 this time. The Tina said we just didn't have the budget for that round trip in a flying saucer. So
747, yeah, we're flying retro tonight.
Right, is that retro?
Yeah, it is now.
All right, well, Tim, enough of this. I was going to say horsing around, but that's really retro.
Pretty.
Let us get on with the show. Why don't you tell us and our vast audience out there who our guests are this evening and where in Sam Hill we will be going?
Oh my gosh! Well, we'll be going hopefully everywhere tonight, Tim. But our guest, we've got two just absolutely fantastic guests, and I'm absolutely pleased that they've agreed to join us tonight. First of all, we have and Anna, you'll have to correct me if I mispronounce your name, but I'll give it a try here. We have Anna Maria ELISA MANALO.
You can me Anna.
All right. Well, okay. Well, tell us. How do you pronounce your last name, Anna?
It's MANALO.
MANALO,
in Tagalog, that actually means winner.
Ooh, fantastic. All right. Well, Anna is a counselor by profession and an aspiring screenwriter with numerous accolades for her science fiction and horror screenplays that she hopes to get some of them produced for the screen, as they were inspired, now get this, Tim, by her personal experiences as a UFO field investigator for MUFON during a brief stint in 2008 and 2009. Some of her experiences were adopted from books written by Philip Mantle and Paul Stonehill. Now, I should say that she's got a book coming out, hopefully by the end of 2017, under the pen name. What's the pen name? Adelaide. How do you pronounce that? Roca?
Adele Casals Rocha. It
right.
actually is it's a Spanish name, obviously, because I have a Spanish heritage for the background. It ties into the book in terms of the cultural aspects of it. But Casals is translated as house, Rocha is rock. So it's a solid house. That's kind of like the way it would translate.
All right. Well, and I should point out that Anna was born and raised in San Juan, the Philippines, where family members witnessed apparitions, specters, and a Mothman type of creature, which led to her father's untimely death. And Anna, I read that account, and that's just absolutely terrifying.
Did you?
Yes, yes. And I completely unrelated to the show, I ran across it, oh gosh, probably about a month or so ago, before I even realized that you were going to be on our show. And we'll bring this up so the audience can hear this as well. Okay, also with us tonight, Tim, is Michael Huntington. This is Michael's return visit to Exploring the Bizarre, and he's a paranormal travel writer, researcher, and artist who's had a lifetime fascination for weird stories and strange encounters, especially UFOs. Now, Michael travels to dozens of strange locations each year with his wife and young boys, documenting what they see. Now, Michael is fascinated and has documented in photographs cases and locations of famous UFO sightings, hauntings, cryptid locations, space and aviation museums, film locations, and other weird and fascinating stuff. So, Anna, Michael, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Well, I see we've got a lot of traveling to do, and I'm
do,
going to
yes.
start out. Yeah, I want to start out with Anna, who we've been friends on Facebook for a while, but we really haven't communicated all that much. Now, Anna, why didn't you start at the beginning? I guess how you had this experience in your family. How did you get all involved in this? I mean, you seem to be dedicating your life, or a good part of it, towards the expressing your belief and interest in the paranormal and the unknown.
Well, it wasn't intended that way. I was born and raised in a country that had experienced a lot of tragedy. It's an old country where we had World War II. And as you know, when things like that happen, where you have massacres, deaths, and things of that nature that are beyond description, remnants of those events linger. I was raised in a household that happened to be unwittingly the graveyard of a lot of Japanese soldiers. And I'll tell you, that's not where I began. I actually began about 3 miles away. And stop me at any point if you think I'm talking too much. I tend to get.
Oh, my goodness, no.
I was in a small apartment. I would say it was newly built at the time, in a town called Little Baguio, Baguio. It's kind of hard to pronounce, but it's a very small hamlet of San Juan. And it was about maybe 3 miles from my grandmother's house.
And this we should point out again is in the Philippines.
This is in the Philippines, and
right.
If you look at a map of the Philippines, it's in the largest island of Luzon and situated where you would have the eye. It's right above the eye. So if you look at it like as if it's an animal, that's where you would find San Juan and the surrounding area. And Little Baguio is a little bit just above San Juan. And the place where we lived in actually was a series of townhouse apartments. And this is where we first encountered something that was very, very terrifying. At the time, I personally don't have a conscious recollection of what had occurred. But my mother was there. My father obviously was there. How old would you have been? I was when it started. I was probably merely a year old, so really not conscious of all these events. The first recollection I had of something that was totally awry, I was probably about 2.5, and it was probably 2 days after my father passed away. But this is where he saw through the window a creature that was probably about 9 feet tall And if you look at the Mothman accounts, which I know there's a flap right now in Chicago.
That's what I hear, yeah.
Yeah, the descriptions are pretty close. I would say the shape of the face, the wingspan, that kind of like a leathery look, the way it moves is very much right on. And I was really surprised, a little bit taken aback by it, because I had, seen the movie with Richard Gere, read the book by John Keel, but I really couldn't get a picture of it until when I saw these accounts. And as they said, with the Silver Bridge story, which is supposed to be kind of like a harbinger of things to come, this creature showed up at our apartment window at the dead of night. Actually, once twilight set in, he would start hearing a humming. And my father had a den. He was a full-time writer, so he worked from home. And he's relatively young. He was 24 when he passed away. He had just gotten out of college a few years back. They had gotten married. So this is their first apartment together. The nursery where I was right next door. His den was in the middle.
Now, were you on the ground floor?
We were on the second floor.
Okay. So that means Mothman would have been flying or hovering. I mean, it wasn't like it was standing on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, it was hovering. From what I understand, it was actually clinging to the window. And windows back then, because there's no air conditioning, they were pretty high up. They were pretty large. They had wrought iron bars on them for protection, even on the second floor. And right about, I would say, yards past the window, there was a creek. And lining the creek were these huge trees. One of those trees happened to be right across my father's window. And he had a desk that was a few feet from the window. He would face the window. He had, a Smith Corona typewriter. But as things went on, for several months, this creature would show up at the window, and it would be preceded by a very subtle humming sound, like a ringing in your ears. And things seemed to stand still, from what I understand. And then he would see this creature, and it was a manifestation of sheer menace, a very deep sense of sadness. I feel creeped out right now talking about it. All the hairs on my arms are standing. And he would back away from the desk and try to convince someone to come in quickly enough to be able to see it. And in every instance, by the time either the maid or my mother came in, the creature was gone. So for a while, he thought he was hallucinating. Until one particular time, the maid walked in and happened to see this creature. It was pointedly looking at him as he was sitting there at his typewriter trying to ignore it.
That is so eerie.
Yes, it was very eerie. And eventually, they had gotten to the point, I mean, I was too small, where they didn't want to leave him alone. It just so happened that one afternoon they did. The maid had left, from what I understand, met up with a relative. And by the time my mother came back to the apartment with me in tow, he had already done some things, and it was irreversible.
And he died of a heart attack, or?
No, he slashed his wrists.
Oh my goodness.
She found him in the bathroom. Yeah, I can talk simply right now because it's been quite a number of years. But
yes.
She had told me in detail the entire story. I actually did not know any of this until I was about 18 years old. But the uncanny part about it is that my friends in school used to ask me, how come your uncle picks you up from school? How come you're not your dad? And I would actually tell him, because he killed himself. He slashed his wrists. And I found out it was true just because I happened upon the death certificate when I was 18, the first time I visited. And I don't know.
So had he indicated to members of your family that he was terrified by this?
Did,
I mean,
but
or was
no
it,
one,
or
yeah,
do you think the creature had something directly to do with his death?
he
I mean,
felt
other than the
that.
sighting, like mind control or.
Right, right. Well, he did feel that. He felt that the creature was trying to get in his head. He said he was afraid to sleep because he was entering his dreams. He felt like the creature was trying to take his soul. My father wrote poetry, and his poetry was published after his death. And quite a number of the poetry alluded to this, talked about the bird that flies is false. The only clue that we knew it to be real is when we actually got collaboration, because when the maid stumbled in on this, she ran out immediately. My mother walked in, and she walked in on it as it was trying to go through the window, and it was translucent. And this to me alludes that the creature is multidimensional. It's not flesh and blood, because it was in fact trying to go through the window, and it partially succeeded. And my mother ran towards the other side of the wall, grabbed a cross. And this is where the controversy enters, because if this was Mothman, it wouldn't have done anything to it. She took the cross, started praying loudly, and she approached it. And the creature folded up. It took one wing and covered itself as if it was like a vampire. And it started to effervesce out the window and into a mist. So you tell me what that is.
Yeah. Now, how many years ago would this have been?
Oh, this is ancient. This is like 1962. Yeah, and that's how it started. That's how my fascination started. That's how I started looking at things in a different way.
Now, have you ever had any dreams or sightings of this creature?
Not this creature in particular. I have had dreams. As I grew up, I've also had sightings of other ghosts, because right after my father passed away, we moved back into my grandmother's house. And as I've mentioned before, this was actually a graveyard of sorts. The ground was never blessed. They were never recognized as being there. The houses were built right after World War II. There was a lot of building that was going on, a lot of rebuilding. And my grandfather built a house right on that soil. The sightings that I saw had to do with emaciated Japanese soldiers.
Wow.
That were gaunt. You could hear them running down the driveway. Sometimes they would wear these slippers. They're kind of like flip-flops these days. And you would hear them jump over the gate. The gate is physically there. They would jump over the gate, and the edge of their slipper would actually hit it and make a sound. We had problems keeping servants in the house. They came in one day, a couple of weeks later, they would leave, and they were terrified.
Well, I think I would be too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had some ghostly encounters growing up, but nothing quite on that level. Now, how many times did they? I was going to say appear, but materialize, or that they were, presented themselves.
You mean at my grandmother's house?
Yes.
Well, I would say that they appeared to everyone. Probably the only one person they didn't appear to was my grandfather for some reason. He was a medical doctor. He was very scientific. He didn't believe in any of
it. That explains it, I suppose.
We used to have something we called mumbo jumbo. It was jet black. and it was so gaunt you could tell it starved. It would sit all the way in the backyard with its glowing red eyes. And one of the servants would come out there to feed the cats, and they start shivering for no accountable reason. You got to remember, this is a tropical climate.
Now, was this the cat shivering or the servant?
No, the servant, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, probably the cat too, I would guess, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that because, we've had incidences, and it's actually pretty gruesome. We have cats there. They're feral cats for the most part. We probably had about a dozen at one point in time, but they mysteriously die.
Now, what did you call this being again?
Mumbo Jumbo?
Mumbo Jumbo.
Mumbo Jumbo was the nickname we gave it. I mean, you got to make light of some of these things because, they can get pretty intense. Different parts of the house, you saw different things. At the edge of your view, you would see something pass, and it was like a shadow man. Mm-hmm. On the second floor, my grandfather had a laboratory. And I talk about this in the book. All this stuff I'm talking about tonight, I talk about in the book.
This will be the book that you'll have out in next year.
Sometime
or at the
in
end
December.
Of this year.
Yeah. He had a lab, and way back then, because he was a medical doctor and he had seen action, he was in a MASH unit, they were also taught how to make pharmaceuticals, simple stuff like cough syrup, et cetera, so that when they were in the field and someone got sick, they could be addressed immediately. Mm-hmm. So in this lab, he would create and concoct different types of things. My mother had 5 other siblings, all living in the house at the time. Most of them were children during the war. So after that, my grandfather had established a lab on the second floor. And in that lab, one day we found a full-grown fetus in a jar.
Ooh. I mean, how did it get there?
Okay, so we have some very bizarre, and I don't know how much you know about the Philippine culture. We're 99.9% Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. At that time, it was acceptable for families to be pretty large. And this will give you an idea why I'm writing under a pen name, because there are people who are still alive to this day that were members of this household.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
This is Mumbo Jumbo coming in here. So we'll be back right after this little break. Very exciting show and a very exciting guest this evening.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back, and tonight we are traveling on the paths that others fear to tread. And we want to bring Michael Huntington into the conversation. But first, Anna, I need you to finish this story. The story about the fetus in the jar. So I mean, if
fetus
you can,
in the jar.
Yeah, if you can finish this, and then we'll bring Mike into the conversation.
Okay, I will try to make this as brief as possible. The house that my grandmother and grandfather had built was built about a few months after the war had ended in the Philippines, World War II. So it's probably about 1946-ish, 47. And what they did was they built it to accommodate every child they had. They had 6 children. So he had 6 bedrooms. Eventually, what he decided was he was going to dedicate one of those bedrooms into a laboratory. At the time, when he actually had it built, they were only planning on 4 kids. But then my grandmother decided, hey, let's make room. So actually the lab was never really a bedroom. It was a laboratory. One of the things that was acceptable back then was to have a huge family. But in this case, I'm trying to finish as quickly as I can. It didn't happen that way. and abortion was against the rules, etc., etc. The person who discovered the fetus in the jar was one of the servants. Okay, and what happened then is that she ran out, told my grandmother, who seemed to know about it. And I will leave it that it was something that was intentionally put there. About a week later, my grandfather came into the lab, took the jar out, and didn't explain to anyone where it went. So mysteriously, it disappeared. To this day, no one knows what happened to it, whether it was ever buried, whether it was taken. He was affiliated with a hospital, whether it was taken to the hospital.
Well, do you think that, he brought it into the house originally, your grandfather?
I believe he did.
Okay.
And it is definitely human. A couple of the children who were now adults had seen it, including my mother. My grandmother disclosed, actually before I emigrated to the U.S., that was a source of a hex in the family. The fact that there was an unblessed and unburied infant in the family.
Well, not only did that house have going for it that it was built on top of probably a mass grave of Japanese soldiers, but then you had a fetus in a jar, an unburied infant. So
yes,
that had to have been a fun place to grow up in.
It was definitely very different. And I will tell you, when things like that happen repeatedly, it stresses people out. And as you know, when there's unquiet beings around you, they create mayhem.
Well, speaking of unquiet beings, let's bring Michael Huntington into the conversation.
Nice segue.
Well, Michael, I'm glad that you could join us tonight. Tim Beckley, he was wanting to know, considering Anna's father's experience with the Mothman. Tim was asking if you you've been to Point Pleasant, correct?
Yeah. Me and the wife and the kids, we went to the Mothman festival that they hold there each year. We went to the 50th anniversary last September, and visited all the encounter spots and went out to the TNT area and looked around there. Got to hear some lectures from some famous cryptozoologists. So that was a unique experience. And Mothman definitely, I think, is at the top of the cryptid heap there, so to speak. Even to this day, half a century later, people are still talking about it. Even in Chicago, Chicago's got that wave going on, which is really unusual. There's just so many accounts, so many reports, that you have to consider that something's flying around, whether it's an owl or somebody's got some sort of weird drone, or if there's some sort of being or creature that is from another dimension and is a harbinger of doom. All these things are considerations. We were in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and we hung in the area downtown where most of the sightings are. They're actually pretty much all around Millennium Park up there, and there's a lot of birds and herons and all sorts of things flying around there in the lake. But
well, now I haven't really followed. I know about the sightings, but I haven't followed them that closely. Have any of has any of the media in Chicago or vicinity covered this flap?
Well, I get a lot of my updates from like Lon Strickler.
Oh yes, of course.
A lot. Yeah, and he pretty much has conveyed a lot of the information there and has collected a lot of the reports. But yeah, from what I've seen, it looks like Chicago media is kind of all over it. You know, it's a human interest story, and it's kind of, they take those things with a sort of tongue-in-cheek attitude, and it ends up at the end of the program. But people are seeing stuff, and people are talking about it up there, and I think it's interesting that, so far removed from the original sightings, it's still flying around, I guess, or at least the imagination of it is,
Well, I was watching a program. I guess it was originally broadcast on the Sci-Fi Channel, but I was watching it on YouTube yesterday, kind of by accident. Actually, I was dozing off, and it went on to the next program. I was watching something about missing 411, and then all I know is that they were talking about Mothman, and they had some fellow on from the Skeptics magazine, and he was saying about how Mothman was nothing more than an owl, because the eyes of owls apparently do glow at night. But he's sitting there next to a stuffed owl, and I can't see how anybody would think that this little creature of the night could be something as large and dynamic and perhaps demonic as Mothman. I mean, Mothman was described as being about 10 feet tall, and this little cute little cuddly owl was instead of being 10 feet tall, maybe 2 feet tall. I don't know. I mean, but it was not a giant. I certainly would not have thought that it was a giant bird. And also, too, now here's the kicker. I do believe that some of the early witnesses heard the flapping of the wings. I do believe that there would be a big discrepancy or difference between the sound of a creature flapping its wings that's 10 feet tall as opposed to a little owl. Floop, 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 floop.
Yeah, and I think there is a difference between the encounters in West Virginia back then, because a lot of them were close to the ground, and they can measure height compared to the tree that it's next to or whatnot. But I think most of the Chicago stuff is pretty much just things flying around in the sky, and so it's hard to. I don't know if anybody's reported anything like 10 feet tall or whatever. I think most of the accounts up there have been, something big is flying around.
Well, if it's not 10 feet tall, I'm not interested.
Well, now there was a report that I saw just earlier this week that took place where the creature actually flew down and was almost at eye level with the witnesses, but probably no more than 5 feet away. And once again, like you said, Tim, I mean, you can't mistake something like that, for a great blue heron or an owl or something, something similar. They knew what they were seeing, and it was definitely something unusual.
Boy, I tell you, just talking about this got my bladder going, I swear.
That's a good way to put it.
Oh, boy. Mothman, stay away from my door. That's all.
Well, and I should say also, I have seen owls at night. They've flown in front of my car and stuff, and anybody, especially say like the people in Point Pleasant, they knew the difference between an owl and whatever this thing was. As for the people in Chicago, I mean, possibly, somebody who lives in the city all their life, may not be able to, say they see something like a great blue heron.
With the crime situation the way it is Chicago, I'm surprised somebody hadn't brought it down. Saturday. With a Saturday night special or something.
What happens if you kill them?
Come on, no harassing phone calls from Chicago. I'm only kidding.
Yeah, what happens if you kill a Mothman though? Is that like double bad? Or
well, that's Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, is it a crime to shoot at Mothman? Even, yeah. We've got to make a list of cryptoids that you could take down, and it's fine. And I guess Bigfoot is in its own category, and you got to kind of leave him alone, I bet. So now, Michael, is that one of your interests when you travel, or the creature, different beings and creatures and oddities?
Well, Tim, I'm sort of into anything. Anything that is between point A and point B, and everything at point A and point B, whether it's monsters or ghosts or aliens or anything interesting. I got my feet dipped into it, but
I was going to say you got your antenna up.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, so have you come across in your travels? Well, I guess you haven't come across personally, but have you been to other spots where creatures have been noted?
Yeah, I've been to a few Bigfoot locations throughout the Midwest.
Where were they?
Probably the one that I've sort of looked into the most was the Murfreesboro Mud Monster in southern Illinois.
I don't think I know him. Give me a little rundown on that.
Okay. Murfreesboro, Illinois is a little town just outside of Carbondale in southern central Illinois. And in 1973, in the Riverside Park area, people started encountering a Bigfoot type creature, fur, large size, left enormous footprints. But this creature was white. It was possibly an albino. It had like pinkish orange eyes, and it had white fur. It was muddy though. So it's also called the Mud Monster. The river that flows by there, where it was seen, is called the Big Muddy. So it's also called the Big Muddy Monster.
Well, I guess you should never have a white couch and never have a muddy monster, I suppose. Certainly not the two of them together. I would guess. Yeah.
Right. You can sort of imagine the appearance of the fur, like a big Shetland dog or something, all muddy, tracking through your garden. So that's what people were seeing. There were dozens of encounters in that area, and it was one of the cases that was investigated by Lauren Coleman.
My goodness,
who is from South Central Illinois. So it's one of his cases that he first investigated. So I've been over there. I've looked at the spots. I make it back there once a year now because they actually Murfreesboro has a Big Muddy festival. But does it have a local beer named after it? Yes, it's a beer festival.
See, I know that every monster. If you're a monster of any repute, you gotta have a local beer.
Exactly.
In fact,
and
somebody
it's right
should
next to
collect
Carbondale.
the next party that I have. I'm only going to serve monster beer.
It's a pretty decent beer, and they're just starting to get into the cryptid aspect, but they definitely it's all held right, where the first encounter was, which is kind of interesting. So I make it over there to look around, but pretty much a lot of the cryptid stuff that Lauren Coleman researched back in the 70s, I've sort of gone back and looked at some of the same places. Sometimes I'll send him photos. I talk to him online, and
oh my goodness,
I'll send him photos because I like to do the updated. This is where a location was, or this is where a sighting was, or whatever, and he sort of helps out in confirming some of my locations. Because things change after 40 years or whatever. But
what was the latest sight? What was the latest sighting of the Muddy Monster?
I think the last sighting was in '86. The creature attacked some people at a auto salvage yard.
Wow.
But people continue to see Bigfoot type creatures, in southern Illinois. You can go on to, like BFRO's Bigfoot locating, tracking a map system there, and you can see where people are seeing things. There's a lot of wooded area around where I'm at. But yeah, people see all kinds of things, around here, flying creatures and, weird monsters and, things in the river, Mississippi River, so pretty busy area.
Well, my friend and associate, the fellow who helps us get all this up on YouTube, Peter Bernard, has written about Dog Man. Have you come across Dog Man in your travels?
Well, when I go to like cryptid conferences or whatever, Dog Man seems to be, sort of the popular, move for a lot of the Bigfoot researchers, because it basically is, like a werewolf.
Uh-huh. Well, he's just kind of moved into the neighborhood, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So, the sightings are sort of similar to Bigfoot, and there's tracks left, but people are seeing werewolves, which that would just scare the heck out of me. I have been to some of the Dogman locations in Kentucky. There's an area called Land Between the Lakes, which is a forested reserve area, and there was a creature seen back in the 70s and the 80s, and reportedly, here and there since then, of a dog man type creature or some sort of werewolf. There's even urban legends of wow. Entire families getting eaten, nothing found but bloody clothes, and animals getting attacked and just torn apart by some sort of werewolf type creature. But I don't know. I'm not really interested.
That's some howling experiences.
I like to go into the woods, but I don't know if I want to go hunting a werewolf at nighttime. It's not like Bigfoot, who seems to be a little more, I don't know, environmentally friendly as opposed to a werewolf type.
I wonder if the two of them are ever seen like at the same time.
Oh, that's a good question.
Uh-huh.
I would think so.
Well, Godzilla and Mothra had nothing on those guys. I swear. We've got to update this and do a movie with Dogman and Bigfoot or something.
There you go.
Or I like the muddy monster myself.
Yeah, they have to fight. That would be a werewolf.
As long as he takes his shoes off before coming into the house, that's all.
Well, no, the Murfreesboro and Central Illinois. I mean, it was also a hotbed of activity for like Thunderbird sightings as well.
Yes.
There was that, and I can't remember what community it was in, but there was the one case where the little boy was almost taken away when the Thunderbird swooped down and grabbed his shoulders, and if it wasn't for his mom, I think hitting it with a stick or something, it would have disappeared. And that definitely wasn't an owl.
Yeah, I think I remember that case. I think that was like around Mount Vernon. Again, like back in the 70s, because it seems like, like all the good monster stories come from, like 1973 for some reason. I don't. It's sort of interesting, but yeah, the Thunderbird stuff definitely is part of the native culture in Illinois, and I take the boys to a lot of museums, and we also visit like native heritage spots, and everywhere we go, there is the Thunderbird motif. The some sort of giant flying creature, was part of at least part of the ceremonial ritual aspect of these communities. Whether or not it was some sort of tangible creature, legend holds that it was. You go to Alton, Illinois, another place that we visited recently, and on the side of a cliff is a recreation of a giant bird monster. More like a classic griffin, from like Greek mythology, or like maybe a manticore or something like that. And the Indian legend of the Cahokia Indians, famous for their Cahokia Mounds, which is a World Heritage Site, tells of some sort of giant being called the piazza bird, or the piasol bird, and I think local Indians had to, had tried to fight it and get it out of the caves near Alton, which is right directly on the Mississippi River, a little bit just north on the Illinois side of St. Louis. And they tried getting this creature, so the chief, whose name I can't remember just right now, but he devised a plan where he would use himself as bait to lure the piasol bird out of the cave that it was living in, so that his warriors could attack it. And supposedly it was vanquished, because the creature fell for the trap. But there were real drawings on these cliffs of giant drawings of these giant birds, or manticores, or some sort of flying winged monster. That was definitely a part of the culture. And you go anywhere around here, you're going to see some sort of giant bird motif.
Yeah, it is. It is funny, though. Here you have these old Native American legends, of these flying creatures, and then, like you said, and especially in the 1970s, there was this explosion of giant bird sightings almost in the same areas. I don't know.
And UFOs.
And UFOs. That's right. Yes. Descendants coming back to find out who killed Grandpa. Well, we have to go to our bottom of the hour. Top of the hour break. Oh my gosh, time is flying, Tim. So let's do our break, and when we come back, right, we will continue our travel episode.
Well, I see they're coming by with some more peanuts and some more champagne. So let's have a little break here, and we'll be right back.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
I just tried to make it down the aisle there. I had to use the restroom in the back through the coach part of the plane, and I tell you, there's all kinds of fights and stuff going on back there. I could hardly make it back up to my first class seat here in the this big 747, which strangely enough looks like a mothership. I hope it's going to the right destination.
Well, we've got the best seats, Tim. We're right up here in the very top level of the 747. There's a bar, and the alcohol is free flowing, and it just makes for a wonderful flight.
Well, it's a long flight, so we're going to continue on with the second part of the flight here.
Well, yeah. Why don't we bring Anna back into the conversation here, because I'm very interested in your bio information, Anna. You said that you hope to get some of your experiences produced for the screen, especially concerning your field investigation for MUFON. And I see you were with them from 2008 through 2009.
Yeah, that was a very interesting experience, because I got to tell you, timing is everything. A friend of my husband's had actually talked to me about MUFON because he was an investigator in training at the time, and he said, "Hey, all you got to do is buy this book, study this book from cover to cover, and that's the manual, and then, call them for this test." So I did that, took the test, passed the test, and lo and behold, it was April of 2008, and that's when the Bucks County flap started. So I was immediately getting assigned cases. It came through
Bucks County being in
Bucks County in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I keep forgetting where you are. So over here in Pennsylvania, in the very southeastern corner, we had a lot of activity that increased by 700%. And we're talking from April 2008 all the way into November of the same year.
Wow.
During that time, it was basically the director who was assigning cases, and that's, John Ventre. And then it was me and another gentleman. He had a larger territory because I was actually not well versed in driving. Driving is not one of my strengths, but interviewing was. So the other gentleman would get on the ground and actually take samples, things of that nature. And I was the person who would make first contact, and I would do all the interviews. Throughout that flap, and you know how things are when you're investigating, a lot of times people will mistake lights in the sky for something, and it's actually the ISS, yada, yada, yada. But there remains that 20% that can't be explained. I didn't know with the limited time we had whether you wanted my personal sightings or whether you wanted me to relate to you some of the things that people have told me.
Well, I'm sure we're going to have you back on again. So tonight, let's hear about your experiences, and then a couple of months from now or whenever we can get in depth on some of the things that you've actually investigated closer to when your book is due to be released. But tell us about some of the other experiences that you had. Have you had UFO encounters?
Yes, I have. And it's interesting that you ask me that because that's actually the heart of the book. I am halfway through the book right now, and I was just getting to that point, which is a pretty big one. It started with an encounter that I had. I would say I was probably about 18 years old at the time. I was living in Connecticut. I was in a dormitory. I was just about ready to graduate from college. And I was walking. The dorm that we had was actually pretty remote in comparison to the rest of the campus. So one evening, very late, I was walking back from a party, basically. And it was pretty dark. I think it was probably 1 a.m. or 1:30 in the morning. And something went out of the cloud. And whatever it was, you could tell was not a plane. And I'll tell you what it is. It looked like a triangle that was standing on its side, that was sitting on top of the base of a triangle. And I know it's kind of hard to visualize. If you visualize a large triangle, I guess, with a black band running across the bottom half of it towards the base. It wasn't moving. It came out of a cloud is what it looked like to me, and it was just stationary, probably over 500 feet above me. It cleared the trees. A plane, a helicopter, anything like that, it had to be moving or it would drop. This thing was just there. I had no idea what it was. Once again, it was preceded by silence. It's very eerie because you couldn't hear anything. And when you're walking through a pathway towards a building that is kind of embedded inside a little wooded area, okay, because it's very subrural where I was. You would hear crickets, you would hear frogs, you would hear animals of the night. somehow it just got very quiet, so that my attention was drawn to this cloud that somehow was just up there above me. And I paused, looked at it, and there this thing was. It was almost like it was shimmering. So, of course, I ran. I was pretty much by myself at the time. My roommate, I think, was already at the dorm. And it seemed like it was trying to get me to stop. And when I say that, it felt like though I was running in place. And I got to the point where I was so anxious that I was trying to reach a lamppost, and I extended out my hand and willed myself to get closer to the lamppost that was down the path. And it was only by sheer will that I was able to reach it. And then in my head, I kept thinking, get away from me. Get away from me. And whatever it was stopped shimmering, and then it kind of just disappeared. And then I was running. And then I realized how fast I was running, and then I got to the dorm. So that was the first encounter I had.
It's almost like how some people describe when they're trying to run in a dream. It's you just you run and run and run, yet you just don't get anywhere. It's almost like you're trying to run through water or through mud or something like that.
Yes, there's kind of like a desperate element to it. You feel very much like you're being watched, is how I would describe it, which makes it different from whatever is just up there. That could have been a plane, a helicopter. This had no sound whatsoever. It was incredibly quiet, and it's like the whole area just got very, very quiet, as if I was encased, in some type of field almost.
Oh, well, Jenny Randall, she refers to that as the Oz effect. Where everything, it's almost like you feel like that you're just have become separated from the rest of the world. You're just by yourself, Well, there's other people have described almost the identical type of situation as you've described, especially that where they're trying to get away and they just feel like that something is pulling them back almost. The more that they try to run away, the more resistance they seem to run into.
And the next one I had was several years later, and I'll tell you, I had quite a few. I won't tell you the big one, not yet. But
you have to get the book for that one.
Yeah, it was progressing. I was at the time married. Okay, I was actually already living here in Pennsylvania. Not in this house, but the previous house. We had moved in here about 5 years ago. But I remember very, very vividly one night, I was sound, and I'm a sound sleeper. I'm not really prone to nightmares or things of that nature. I fall asleep, the next thing you know, it's morning. This particular evening, I had gone to bed a little earlier than usual for some reason. And I work at a school. I normally go to bed, early. But this is even earlier. I think it was like 8 o'clock. So I fell asleep immediately. I guess I was exhausted. But the next thing I knew, it was pitch dark around me. And there was something that was standing right next to my bed, to my right. And it wasn't my husband. I'm just joking. Anyway, it was standing intently looking at me. I was trying very hard to open my eyes, obviously, because I thought the first thing that came to my head was, I'm having a nightmare. But I knew I was coming to wakefulness because I remember struggling to pull my arm up as if in defense. because I felt like my throat was somehow very vulnerable for some reason.
Mm.
Whatever it was came so close to me, I felt something like a feather brush my neck. When I say that, it's like when a person comes close to you, you hear their breath, something. It was a feather that I felt. And whatever it was intently examining my throat. Couple of nights later, I disregarded it, woke up, went about my business, didn't tell anybody. I figured, okay, I must have been asleep. Surely I must have been asleep. A couple nights later, the same thing repeated again. It was so close, whatever it was, the feather was skimming my throat. I could not reach up. I could not scream. It was almost like sleep paralysis. Okay, but then finally I was able to loosen one hand, and I must have clenched into a fist, and I swung up, to protect my neck. And once again, there's the feather. And then I opened my eyes, and there was nothing there.
Mm. So now, do you perceive this as being a paranormal experience? Or associated with UFOs, or what?
I'm open to whatever you think it might be.
Yeah.
But it did progress. When I was a teenager, I had a friend who was very much into astral projection, out-of-body experiences, etc., etc. So much so that she would experiment trying to actually lift her body up, and I'm she's not crazy. She really is into this. She's into Tibetan Buddhism, and she used to tell me people could do that by just concentrating. They could do an OBE.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'm capable of that. She told me she could. At some point, I attempted it a number of times. When you're friends with someone, the influence of friends, etc. But one night, while I was in this same house, I started feeling like I was levitating.
Mm. I
woke up, and once again, there was something that was right next to me at the bed. But this time, I am above it. And I'm opening and struggling to open my eyes, and I finally opened my eyes to find my eyes close to the ceiling. Do you tell me what that is?
Sounds like an out-of-body experience to me.
Yeah, well, it could be. It could be.
Sounds similar to one that I had when I was about 6 or 7 years old. But you know what I was interested in? We both share an interest in writing. Of course, we have about 270 books, I guess, we've published over the years. Haven't written all of them, I must say. Tim Swartz has written most of them.
Not quite.
But I noticed that you seem particularly interested in writing screenplays. I mean, do you envision some of these stories making exciting films?
Oh, I do. And I think that I seized upon that particular currency because if you do succeed, and I'm hoping one day I will,
yes,
in getting one produced, it will come alive. It is an extremely powerful medium. And I'm not saying the writing is not, books are not, but this is immediately right there. You can hear it, you can see it. And the pace of it is it's so believable. All the CGI things that you can do these days, it's a great medium. So I am hoping, and the longest script I've written is about 112 minutes. which is, about on par. But it really capsulizes all those events that people have encountered. I adapted 2 of Philip's books. One he co-wrote with Paul Stonehill. They were all nonfiction, but what I did was I took one of the stories, and it's called Height 611. And it involves, I'm trying to think about facts here. It's a hill. Height 611 is the name of a hill that is in the Russian Maritimes. Something crashed on the hill, awakened the entire small coal mining community. And that's how it begins. And the story unfolds from there, what happens to what they actually find, and how they're influenced by these beings. And go ahead.
And this is completely written already.
Yes, these are completely written already.
Well, hopefully somebody, some big Hollywood bigwig, will hear the program and perhaps contact you. And maybe by that time, Tom Cruise will be back in action, because we hear he I don't think he's ever done a monster movie, but geez, I guess he really got clobbered there the other day doing special effects. And I know of having been involved in some production work myself. Usually, very well-known actors that they're not allowed to do their own special effects. I mean, he might have started out his career doing it 25 years ago or something, but usually if you have a big Hollywood production and you're insured, which costs you a lot of money because you got a lot of people working on the set and under some very dangerous circumstances, your main characters are not allowed to do that work. You got to have doubles and stuntmen and stuff do that. But I guess he still. I mean, that looked pretty dangerous to me. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. I'd have somebody sit in for me on that one.
Well, Hollywood definitely needs some very well-written screenplays. I mean, anymore it's just all CGI and explosions. With very little plot. So very disappointing. I mean, I've seen some of these, like Fast and Furious or whatever they called it now, and I was just so disappointed in it because I liked the first 6 episodes. They were real car chase scenes and stuff like that. And this is all special effect. I mean, we know The Rock isn't really riding the missile and torpedo. It ruins it. But I guess it's so dramatic that for the first couple of weeks they can come in and clean up and make $400 million. But I'd rather see. I mean, I like special effects, nothing wrong with it. But I'd like to see something with a little a story behind it. Now, Michael, you've been to some places where movies have been made. Is that right?
Usually, as I said before, whenever we take a trip, I try to see what's along the way, and I've been to most of the Close Encounters filming locations.
You've been to Devil's Tower?
I have not been to Devil's Tower. That's what the most part wasn't that.
I thought you would have scaled the side of it by now.
I am going to do that. I so much want to do that. And they're starting to have UFO festivals there.
No way, really? There too?
Yeah, the first one I think at Devil's Tower is going to be this year.
Oh my goodness.
I don't think I'll make it up for that, but maybe next year. Hopefully it'll go over well. That'd be a fantastic spot, especially the anniversary of the movie. They're re-releasing that in theaters.
That's right. So, this month I think it is. Yeah.
Sometime soon.
Yeah, in fact, I just was going through some of my files yesterday, and I came across a couple of issues of the Close Encounters poster magazine. I was I was the editor who had to draw the parallels between what happened in the movie and what happened in real UFO cases, which of course I do. I mean, by looking at the film, kind of what he had in mind, and if I didn't, I mean, you could draw on actual case studies. And then I found an article well, it wasn't really much of an article. It was a drawing of Devil's Tower. I always wondered where, the concept for Devil's Tower came from. Had there been UFO sightings there previously? Because there hadn't been anything written on it. But I found an issue of a little publication that came out of New York called Flying Saucer News, which was edited by a fellow long since deceased by the name of James Rigberg. Now, this would have been, well, James had a bookstore. It was called Flying Saucer News and Prosperity Clinic, and he used to sell little his newsletters, and in fact, some of the T. Lomsing Rampa material I got from him because Rampa couldn't find a publisher for it here in this country. But his Flying Saucer News, I think around 1956 or 57, contained an artwork of the Devil's Tower, and said that there had been UFO sightings around there. So that was many, many years before Close Encounters came out. I don't know if that was an inspiration to Spielberg or not. I can't imagine how he got a hold of that little magazine. But yes, Devil's Tower does attract UFOs.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
It's so nice what he says about us every week.
It is. It really is.
It just seems to grow in intensity.
And it's true as well.
Well, Michael, I want to ask you, where have you been lately?
Well, let's see. When was I on the show last? I think it was like October, September, something like that last year.
Yeah, almost a year ago, right?
Yeah. Since then, I've probably visited about 30 haunted houses. A lot of different ones. Some famous ones. Like the Exorcist house and the Lemp Mansion and McPike Mansion and places like that. And in January, soon after I visited like 6 houses like in one day, I found myself in the hospital. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was back in January. So I was sort of out of it for about, 2 months. We didn't do much traveling, but once I was recuperated, we got back on the road, went down to Eureka Springs. We went to Alton, for a ghost conference and visited some haunted stuff around there. We just took a trip recently to Chicago, as I mentioned earlier. Checked out some museums, movie locations. We visited a lot of Blues Brothers filming locations and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That town's got a lot of movie spots. Although my favorite that I was able to find was Kolchak's office building from the TV show Kolchak.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I was able to see that, it was one of my favorite shows growing up, back in the 70s. Everybody, it was the X-Files of its day,
It
so
was.
it was sort of neat to see the actual offices where the INS building was. Yeah, we did a lot of traveling, the sort of stuff that we do, visiting UFO spots. We visited the Roaring River encounter, which was investigated it was the first case that Hynek and Ted Phillips worked on back in '66. Visited a couple of other.
Where was that?
Roaring River State Park in southern Missouri. Was the first case that Ted Phillips and Jalen Hynek collaborated on. And what it was is that there was a group of hunters nearby the park area called Roaring River, and they were returning to their camp, and they noticed that their camp was on fire. So they rushed to their camp just in time to see a flying saucer lift off, and they had taken a couple of pictures of the object as it flew away. So you have a trace case and a photographic case, and one of the early collaborations after I think they got together after the Socorro sighting. Really, the photograph's a classic UFO photograph, and not too many people know about it. But
no. Is that on your site or on the Google it?
Yeah, you can find it through some of my Instagram stuff. I got some pictures of the location and the original photographs. Some of the Facebook stuff up there. I'll put some more links up there.
Yeah. Do that because we want to do our YouTube version pretty quickly,
cool.
and the more this goes for you too, and the more artwork and pictures and all we have, the more exciting we can make the YouTube version and make it almost come alive.
I love the YouTube version.
The Roaring Rivers UFO looks an awful lot like the UFO that was taken in the 60s by some kids in Michigan, I think, with that same kind of almost like antenna-like structure on the back.
That one I remember, but I think later on they said it was a hoax.
Yeah, well, the Roaring Rivers UFO is very reminiscent of that one.
Huh.
Well, actually, I think the Roaring River, although you are correct but about that case, I think it probably more closely resembles the Portage County UFO chase, the famous Ravenna chase. I think that UFO probably most resembles what's in the Roaring River picture. But yeah, I like to visit these older spots, just to document the location and kind of get people interested in, looking at some of these old cases, their historical impact, as well as, getting people encouraged to
we have to
do some traveling.
We have to get the locals to do a Roaring River festival.
Why not?
Why not?
Well, I mean, there's a thin line between, exploitation and, honoring your heritage and your folklore and all that. And, if it's done, I think in a good way, it can be positive for everybody involved. If people want to go and see it, then, hey.
Well, I did go to the Pine Bush UFO parade and festival this year. I was kind of disappointed in the parade. It lasted about 3 or 4 minutes, but then Pine Bush is not the easiest place in the world to find, even because Pine Bush is not a city in itself. It is a hamlet inside another city, and it stretches only a few. I don't know how many blocks, but they sell tractors there. And I don't know. It was an interesting event, and there were some very good speakers. They had a tent out in the that they put up, and you could hear Linda Zimmerman and Peter Robbins, and Travis Walton was in town, and I think they're planning even a bigger event for next year. So maybe we can all meet in. Bring your binoculars, and we can all meet in Pine Bush.
I'm good to go.
Yeah. So where are you planning to stake out next or stalk?
Well, actually, tomorrow morning I'll be leaving for Kelly, Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Oh boy, that is one of my favorite cases. Do you think that the structure still exists?
The structure does not exist. It was torn down, and there was another house placed on that property, but the well still exists. Where the witness went out and saw the object. Billy Ray, I think his name was. And the field right next to that is where they hold what's called the Little Green Men Days Festival. Geraldine Sutton Stith is one of the people behind that. The Sutton farm was where this occurred, and they started I guess like maybe 6 years ago, taking advantage of their history and people's interest in coming to Kelly, to look around and
now
consider the history.
Didn't the skeptics say on this one, Well, we had Mothman was an owl. In this one, weren't they supposed to be chimpanzees that got loose from the circus or something?
Well, that is one of the
The
theories.
the only chimpanzees, in my feeling, are the skeptics.
Well, actually, I think skeptics look at the owl theory again with that. Although you're dealing with rural folk here, they're going to know what an owl is, and no matter how much you're drinking, and supposedly these people were dry, But as far as the monkey theory, that is out there, and supposedly there was a circus in town. We're trying to find more information about that.
Well, if the
one of those circus trains?
If the monkeys escaped, did they suddenly disappear and go back to the circus?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, the trainers held out peanuts and they ran off the roof and went back to the Of course, if you've watched the movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space, it's all done under a tent anyway. That the UFO is not a giant circus tent. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to the circus that's going to be there this weekend. Kelly, incidentally, the anniversary of the incident in 1955 occurs on Monday.
Oh my
21st.
Goodness.
So, and everybody who's been watching the news knows that Monday is the eclipse.
Whoa! And we've been hearing rumors that all the cryptids, including the reptilians, are going to come out and snatch themselves a human or two.
Yeah, I think South Carolina, or North Carolina, one of those states down there has issued that warning. But Kelly's distinction, I think, with this is that it takes place on the anniversary of the event, but it's also the epicenter of the eclipse. It's the longest point duration.
Wow! So Kelly will be Hopkinsville will be in the news. Now that's a great story.
Yeah, Hopkinsville's.
You would think that the local news, however local, Louisville or something, I guess, would jump on that one.
Well, the local news has been all over it. Hotels have been booked for a year. CBS News did a report on it. The Wall Street Journal did a report on it just in the past, a couple of days. So everybody's sort of taking an interest in what's going on down there. It's a 4-day festival this year, and
are there speakers? Will Stanton Friedman be there, or?
I don't think there's any big people. I think, you would think, but I don't know. I'm going to be there filming a documentary.
Oh, you are? Oh my goodness, that's so exciting!
Yes, they are doing a movie premiere. They filmed a Invasion of Kelly movie that is going to be premiering down there Friday, and it's a 4-day event this year. So they got movies, they got speakers. A lot of the original family members.
I am out of the loop on this one.
Well, I'll try to keep you in the loop. I'll take a lot of pictures.
Send me a couple of links, like to the broadcasts and stuff like that, and I want to watch them. In fact, maybe I'll stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock. Well, I always stay up to 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock anyway, so that's no big deal. I watch YouTube on my giant 56-inch TV screen. Of course, it gets frozen a lot. That's my one complaint about YouTube. I don't know. Is that just freezes up on you, and then it blows up the TV, and it's a real mess. But we're actually getting close to midnight here on the East Coast, and we do want to get back to Anne here for a moment or two. And what are your immediate projects? I mean, is there anything that's really cooking?
You mean me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I actually have a screenplay. I wrote the first draft last year. I just recently picked it up again. It's called Gallery 966, and it's about 2 women, one of whom has been able to enter a portal in a painting. where she meets an incubus. So it's a, it's a horror.
You got a little sex in there, huh? Mhm.
Yeah, a little bit. It's
Well,
a
you gotta
little bit
you gotta pander. You gotta pander, especially if you're gonna make it Hollywood.
Yeah, you say that. So I'm actually in the process of polishing that, finishing the book at the same time. And as you well know, I'm a school counselor, so we're going back shortly, actually, on Eclipse Day. So of all days,
I noticed they said they were not going to let the students out to look at the eclipse.
no.
Who's not letting them do that? That's horrible.
It's going to be business as usual, from what I understand. Actually, we're in the building first, but I don't know that anyone's going to be allowed to leave. And then other than that, I'm actually going back to a home that was built in 1878 and actually doing a little bit of investigating. This home was built by my grandfather's grandfather. So I will be there for a couple of weeks taking pictures. I had a case where I had a lot of orbs in the photographs, and no matter how I cleaned the camera lens, they came out. And then I had
were they orange by any chance?
Actually, they were. It's interesting that you asked me that. And another one I hadn't mentioned is there is a college campus in a little rural town in the Philippines called Los Baños, and that is incredibly haunted because they put the POWs in the gymnasium, and they tortured them in the basement. And they took a bunch of clergy and actually, did what they did with them. They had them walking until they dropped dead. Some they shot, in a line. And they buried some of the bodies underneath what is now the auditorium stage. So I'm going back to that area to just check into that.
What are you hoping will come about from that? I mean, do you have any expectations, I suppose?
I'm hoping to actually get some activity with a camera.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking a couple of people with me with their own cameras because, as you well know, orbs could just easily be specks of dust.
Sure.
What I was told, and this is the talk of the town, is that these orbs are actually manifestations of spirits that are, disquieted by all the violence, etc. But I'm going to actually put that to the test by having 3 different people with 3 different pieces of equipment.
Are you using still cameras, video, or a combination of the two?
Still mostly. I have a Pentax. Another gentleman has a Canon. I forget what the third camera is like, but they're all pretty much still. And I'm going to include some of that in the book.
Oh, fantastic! You'll have to let us know what happens with that trip.
And remember, we frighten easily.
Well, Tim does. Yeah.
Well, right now, I'm hiding under the desk.
With a bottle of what? What do you got down there?
Well, the liquor store closes in 5 minutes, so I better. The liquor store closes in 5 minutes, and we close in 6.
6, right. Well, I wanted to ask Anne real quick. I mean, have you seen any kind of correlation? I mean, because you've had experiences, both with like ghosts and UFOs, and maybe not necessarily your own experiences, but I mean, has anybody ever told you that they saw a UFO and hey, guess what? Now my house is haunted.
No, so far, no. They've been pretty, in my experiences, the cases were pretty discreet. not to say that these people probably had seen a haunting at some point, but they're very discreet when they're reporting something. It's either an alien, like the case of, I don't think I talked about this, Washington Crossing State Park, which is close to here, or it's an actual haunting. But it's never, although there is one house, now that I remember it, this house is in Thailand. After they had seen something called a tree demon, right behind the tree where it had materialized, there was a huge round ball of light. And it wasn't the moon, because it was, and someone mentioned this, it was orange. It was orange red, and it was very bright. And it was traveling very slowly, and then it suddenly zipped out. I think that was the only case that I've ever seen where there was kind of like a juxtaposition between something paranormal and something that was more like an alien activity.
And what do you feel about, I mean, aliens? Are they coming here from some other planet? Are they, I guess you seem to sway in the direction of the interdimensional, or...
I think it would be very strange for us to believe that we are the only ones here, considering the breadth and the size of the multiverse. And when I say multiverse, there are several levels of reality, different levels of consciousness. I can't believe that we're the only ones here. I really can't. Do I think they're benevolent? I think most of them are, only because the experiences I have had been mostly benevolent. I didn't discuss that tonight.
No.
There are some that are, but the ones that I've seen that are malevolent is based on other cases, witness reports to me.
Well, that would, same here. I mean, from 50 years of doing this, it seems that we have both the good and the evil, just like we have down here. I mean, we're here. I don't know if we're down here or not. Well, I noticed we've hit a little turbulence there in our in our flight, because I guess we're just about ready to land the mother ship. And I do want to I just asked both of our guests, how can our award-winning listeners get in touch with you or read up on your activities? Anne, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Michael.
Okay, well, I have 2 Facebook pages. The updates for the book is under Adele Casals Rocha, and the other one is under my name, and make it simple, Anna Manalo, MANALO. I also have a website that I update, and it is, oh my gosh, I'm actually stumped, storyartisan.wordpress.com.
I'm pretty sure Tina has provided, go to KCOR radio.com on the Exploring the Bizarre page. I'm sure there are link ups. And Michael, take it away. Let's get on the road again. How people can find out your activities, and where do you post? And
okay, well, I'm one of those crazy active social media guys. So you can pretty much find something from me every day on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, all those good places. I'm usually pretty accessible. And I share a lot of stories and pictures. You know, I give a lot of free content out there.
You should be on the lecture circuit.
Oh, then you gotta come up with a lecture, and you have to. Yeah, I don't know.
Yours is a lecture, man. In the old days, you throw up a slide projector and show everywhere that you've been. You know.
Yeah, maybe we'll get around to that. I got a lot of traveling to do, but I also have a Huntington Strange Travels WordPress site. But if anybody wants to befriend me anywhere, more than welcome.
There you go. Well, I would say we had a fascinating show, and we're just coming into the dock here, and we'll be taking off our baggage and our camera equipment. And I see the Muddy Monster is waiting for us outside the gateway door. So it'll be another week, Tim, and we will be back with another exciting episode of Exploring the Bizarre.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.